Welcome just for a moment here and let some folks sign on. I'm Jim LaPierre. This is Sober Now, and today's topic is mommy and daddy issues. And before I get too far into it, please, I really welcome your comments, your questions, things you want to know about. We're live streaming on Sober Now's Facebook page. If you haven't been over there yet, please give it a quick like so you can get notifications about the cool stuff we're doing. Streaming on Choose Help and on a few other streams across Facebook and the internet. Always good to be with you. To jump right into this, really hate the term mommy and daddy issues, but it's part of our social vernacular. It's some terms that are used to cheapen something that's actually really important. What we're looking at with mommy and daddy issues are actually unmet developmental needs. They're things that ideally we should have experienced in our childhood, that things that every child has a right to, that we were deprived of. Sometimes those occurred in the midst of traumatic experiences, different forms of abuse and neglect. But I really want to encourage folks to look at this through the lens of basic childhood needs that went unmet. I'm not one for talking theory or psychology very much, but I will share with you just briefly Erik Erikson. If you have an interest in understanding how people develop, especially over the course of the lifetime, not just in childhood, Erikson's a great guy to look up on like Wikipedia. He was the first psychologist to say that when people have arrested development, whether because of trauma or substance use disorder, that they don't just stop growing at a particular phase. And most of the other famous psychologists, folks that we work from, their ideas would say that when someone's development is arrested, that they stay stuck there. And Erikson said, no, they continue to learn and heal and grow and do other things, but whatever need was not met earlier in life will remain a deficit and will have a big impact on a person's behavior and their choices. And with these issues, those are most notable in how we relate to a romantic partner and in how we relate to authority figures. And there's a lot of different ways that this play out. As a therapist, I hear a lot more about daddy issues than mommy issues, and there's a lot of important reasons for that. Again, I hate these terms. But the short version of that story, a person who tells you that you have those kind of issues is maybe unwittingly being unkind, and they're referring to some very important needs and suggesting that maybe it's something you should get over. What I've learned is I don't know how to get over anything. I know how to go through it. I know how to grieve it. I know how to get my needs met around it, and that comes primarily from involving outside supports, getting the encouragement that I need, but also getting the accountability that I need. It also underscores a way in which transformation and healing are really about more artistry, and they're far more spiritual in nature than they are something that we could say is scientific. If various needs from my childhood weren't met, and I go into therapy as a 30, 40, 50-year-old person, the types of experiences that would have met those needs in childhood will not be the types of experiences that fulfill those needs today. So I think that's worth considering. I think it's also important to notice that there's really only two ways that we try to get what we need, consciously and subconsciously. So when I talk to folks who are telling me that they're searching for answers, but they're not even sure what the questions are, or they're trying to figure it out, quote unquote, figure it out, what they're really doing is overthinking or analyzing or problem solving for a problem that's emotional in nature, a problem that's developmental in nature. So I'm going to cover it with authority figures first. When we're looking for someone to be a mother figure or father figure to us, that most often happens in relating to authority. In 12-step programs, it's a pitfall that folks sometimes fall into because they choose a sponsor that they see as the mother figure or father figure that they've always wanted. I love everything about 12-step fellowships and sponsoring can be an incredible and wonderful experience. I also encourage folks to have really explicit conversations with their sponsee about what is it that you can expect from me and what is it that I expect of you. Because one of the pitfalls is, we may have a sponsor that's signed on to walk us through the steps, to hold us accountable, to make sure that we're doing what we need to do, but they didn't sign on to be a mother figure or father figure. Some folks are very happy to do that, and others are not. So I think the more we're aware of what it is that we need, the more likely we are to get it. The more we're asking for what we need, the more likely we are to get it. But when it comes to these types of needs, there's an enormous amount of vulnerability involved. Outside of 12-step fellowships, I can tell you that for myself, especially as a young man, this is a huge pitfall that I fell into. And unfortunately, I worked for people that were smart enough to exploit it. In any given job site, if there's more than a handful of employees, I can almost guarantee you that there's one person there who's working too hard. They are constantly going above and beyond. They want the manager or the owner to feel like they can't even run this place without them. And I can tell you a lot about that person's childhood, because what they're trying to get is the type of approval that was denied them earlier in life. Now, like I said, I've worked for some really smart narcissists, and when they spot that gives them the opportunity to exploit that unmet need with a lot of false promises, a lot of empty, I think of it as the down the road speech that I get from the first three men that I worked for. They put their arm around me and say, I know you're working hard and the pay isn't very good right now, but down the road, big things are going to happen and you're going to be in a great position and you're going to be making lots of money. And then, of course, that never happened. It took me a very long time and a fair amount of therapy to recognize what was the need that I had that was unmet and how was I trying to go about getting it met. And having that awareness allowed me to seek it in ways that were healthy. They were very uncomfortable, but they were healthy. And I noticed that a lot of my relationships changed with friends and especially with men, with older men, because what I was really looking for was a father figure to get the kind of acceptance and love that I needed so desperately. So the other way, of course, in which mommy and daddy issues come to light is in our partnerships. And this is something that a person is almost never aware of. We live in a culture that places enormous importance on a romantic partnership and seems to suggest that if we choose the right partner, if we find the perfect love, it's going to fulfill our entire lives and it's going to take away all of our past pain. Our lives become a bad Rascal Flatts song of "Bless the broken road that brought me straight to you." It's also there's a cheesy story that I often tell to my clients about the movie Jerry Maguire. It is a classic romantic comedy with the small twist of being about sports, but there's the classic formula for a romantic comedy, which is boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back, and we all live happily ever after. So towards the end of the movie, it's Tom Cruise and Renee Zellweger, and Renee Zellweger says to Tom Cruise, "You had me from hello," which is like, barf, whatever. Cheesy, we can roll with it. But Tom Cruise then says to Renee Zellweger, "You complete me." And I started yelling at my television, "No, she doesn't. That's not her job." And my poor wife face palms like, "Can't we just watch a movie?" It's an occupational therapist hazard. It is not my partner's job to fulfill me. It is not their job to fulfill my needs. It is my responsibility to tend to my own happiness, to identify my own needs, and to ask for them to be met. Anything else is some level of dysfunctional and codependent behavior that isn't part of a healthy partnership. But again, because so much of what we do is subconsciously driven, we don't even realize that we're looking to our partner to fulfill those needs. And because so many of us are survivors, a lot of this goes unspoken. So, for example, the most common form of codependence is being able to intuitively sense what your partner's wants, needs, and feelings are and acting on them before they're even expressed. And when we do that, what we're secretly hoping is that our partner will recognize that we want them to do for us as we do for them. And then, of course, if they don't get it, we get angry, we get resentful, because this is our expectation. And I'm mindful of the expression that my folks in 12-step fellowships use, that expectations are premeditated resentments. And I think that's true in most cases, but the reality is we all have expectations, and the problem is we don't often state them. So when we're clear in any type of relationship, whether it's a romantic partnership, coworkers, friendship, if we can express what it is that we want, need, and feel, that's going to do away with the overwhelming majority of misunderstandings or misconceptions, and it's going to make a great deal possible. But that hinges on vulnerability and our willingness to open up and share our true selves. Obviously, a very healthy thing to do, but for most of us, not the way we were raised, and certainly not the places that active addiction took us. So, if it's not my wife's job to fulfill me, then I need to have a lot of support in my life, and I need to have that with a lot of diversity. And so different types of friendships and chosen family, different types of peer support is invaluable to me. And being able to identify what's going on with me, what do I need, and who can I turn to, means that I spend a lot less time isolated, a lot less time in my head, and a lot less time being depressed. Works really well. If we put this into its simplest form, the example I usually use is the man cold, because it's part of our social vernacular. It's something we can laugh about. Men, when we have a cold, when we're feeling a little bit ill, a high percentage of us become just ridiculous. We want to be taken care of, and we feel like what we're dealing with is just too much. And so to want a little bit of that, or to seek a little bit of that nurturance or that support is reasonable, it's healthy. But only a small amount of that. If we have a lot of that, then what we're really doing is looking for the women in our lives to meet the needs that either a mother met through an enmeshed relationship, or the needs that a mother didn't meet at all. And these are things that are uncomfortable to become aware of. When we're looking to our partners for approval or to fulfill unmet needs, we're putting them in a position of enormous power, and we are most often working to attain conditional love and conditional acceptance. When folks really struggle to come to terms with this, it's crude, but I'll say to them, the person that you have sex with cannot be the person who meets the needs of your childhood, because that's gross. And I try to use some levity and some humor with it, because it is a very uncomfortable thing to recognize. To recognize what those needs were, to come to terms with the fact that they weren't met, is a form of grief in and of itself. A lot of us are left to grieve what never was. But seeking healthy ways of getting those needs met ensures that we don't keep going through patterns in our relationships. I'm fond of asking people in recovery when they're struggling in a romantic partnership especially, I'll ask them, how many healthy relationships have you had? And sadly, the answer is most often none. So considering what is it that we bring to the table, are we in a space to have a healthy relationship? I often quote Louise Hayes. She said, be the kind of person that you want to attract. And so if we can take a step back and consider, am I truly ready for this, or am I seeking a distraction for myself? Am I in a place where I bring a great deal to a romantic partnership, or am I really just looking for somebody to take care of me? I remind folks often that there's a world of difference between caring for someone and taking care of them. It is no one's responsibility to take care of me other than mine. I have a lot of folks who care for me, and when I can relate to them in healthy ways, a lot of things become possible. So I'm just going to pause and check the streams here. I, again, very much welcome your questions, your comments, your experience, strength, and hope. I love hearing from you about what's going on in your recovery and what kind of questions or needs do you have. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. The tech problems always plague me. Thank you, Crystal. I agree completely. We should be calling them mother and father wounds. That's completely on par. And attending to those wounds, honestly, it takes a lot. It's incredibly painful. And to recognize the extent of those wounds increases our responsibility for our own healing, but also the ways in which we need to change. I think quite often, maybe we get sober, maybe we make some positive changes in our lives, and then a lot of our past abuse or past trauma are things that we just bury. And we tell ourselves the past is the past, there's no point in looking at it, it's not going to change anything. And that may be true on a very literal level, but the goal is never to change others. The goal is to change myself and to take responsibility for those wounds and to consider what I need to be able to heal them. Ron, thanks for writing in. Ron says, I got mom issues, daddy issues, stepdad issues, stepmom issues, they addicts. I agree completely. For those of us who have family in active addiction, obviously those folks weren't in a place to give us what we needed in the past or in the present. And if folks are in active addiction, then oftentimes the best we can do is to detach with love. I also want to bring folks' attention to having at least a basic understanding of being an adult child of an alcoholic or addict, because what we know is from the research of people like Gladys Black that growing up in the midst of addiction tends to result in certain characteristics and certain roles that people take on to compensate for the dysfunction in their families. And I think it's important to gain some insight into how does your past limit or harm your present. It's never like I want to say to somebody, hey, let's dig up your past and talk about every horrible thing that ever happened to you. What I want to do is look at how the past is still affecting you, and if we find some ways in which that's happening, then the past isn't truly over in that sense because it's continuing to affect your present. Mary, thanks for writing in. Very glad that what we're talking about today is something that you needed to hear about. So that's awesome. Thank you. Okay. I really want to encourage folks to consider that so much of what we need is best available through chosen family. I really appreciate the fellowship of 12-step communities, but also through things, support groups of all kinds, group therapy, and other endeavors that are conducive to building trust and cohesion. Friendship is beautiful. Chosen family is, to me, claiming someone as being like a brother or sister to me. And part of the reason that my life is so good is I've had 2 chosen mothers over the course of my life, and both of them invested greatly in me. And it was so simple what they did. They simply expressed overtly that they believed in me, that they had faith in me, that they saw my potential and what I could become. And the investments that they made simply in being motherly to me created new possibilities and dramatically changed my life in ways that I wasn't even aware of at the time. And I think that too is part of the journey. Having mindfulness, being willing to pay attention to self and to notice what we're feeling, what we want, and what we need, and acting in a way that supports our continued growth and healing. it's hard. I think all of us want to hit a plateau. We want to reach a finish line and say, okay, that's it. I've done enough. I'm good from here on out. To embrace being a work in progress means that I can get better every single day, and I love that idea. In the end, to me, it's about cultivating relationships and experiences. Those are the things that most matter to me. And the more that I allow my higher power to dictate what and who is in my life, the better those relationships become. I wish that I was so clever that I could say to you, the people and the things that are in my life today are here because I identified them, I searched for them, I found them, and I incorporated it. But all of that would be a lie. The very best people and the very best situations in my life are there because my higher power put them there. This too can be a barrier in our spiritual development. Psychology tells us that how a child experiences their caregivers, usually a mother and a father, but sometimes a mother and a mother or a father and a father, how we experience those relationships, that bonding, that attachment, will have a huge impact on how we conceptualize a higher power and how we relate to a higher power. So what I most often say to folks I serve is that the relationship I have with me and the relationship I have with my higher power is the foundation on which all other relationships are built. But when I really started investing in my own growth and healing, I noticed a lot of unhealthy ways in which I related to myself. I noticed that a lot of the ways in which I spoke to myself and what I allowed in my life was really a reflection of the way that the people who hurt me the most, how they treated me, the things that they taught me through their behavior primarily. And I recognized that those things needed to change. I recognized that unfortunately the wounds that I had with my father had an impact on every relationship I had with every man in my life. It took a lot of growth and a lot of healing for me to get to a place where I could accept friendship from men, where I could allow myself to be vulnerable with men. The wounds that I had with my mother were very different, but every bit as much problematic. I have always been very receptive to vulnerability from women, but I have always responded to it, not always, in my youth and prior to getting a lot of help for myself, I responded to their vulnerability by wanting to take care of or to eliminate whatever problems existed for them. I was not able to relate in a way that was reciprocal or come from a place of my own vulnerability. And I remind folks that it takes a lot more vulnerability to receive than it does to give. A lot of us are really only comfortable being one-way streets. We give and give and give, and then we're amazed that we become drained or burned out because what we're doing is not sustainable. You have to be able to receive in equal measure to what you give, otherwise inevitably your cup becomes empty. I don't really like talking much about 13th stepping, but it is very intimately connected to having mother wounds or father wounds. Unfortunately, when we're, especially in early recovery, the only thing that a lot of us know to do with intimacy is to engage in sex. And I think when we don't know what to do or we're not sure how to be, we tend to regress, we tend to revert to what's most familiar to us. And so we offer this up because we know they'll like that. And quite often that vulnerability gets exploited. And I don't want to say that that's specific to 12-step groups. It certainly isn't. It happens everywhere. When we are vulnerable because we don't have a choice, as in the case of desperation, when we are vulnerable with the wrong people, then we become more exploitable. And listening to your intuition and following your instincts, to me, are the best guides for who should I trust and who should I open up with. Recognizing that someone was placed in your life by a higher power these are more effective ways to come to a place of trust and taking a small amount of risk to open up that pay off much better. So, gonna check the feeds again just real quick. Any last minute questions I would love to hear or see. Vicky, thanks for writing in. I appreciate it. It's funny, Vicky writes in that she feels personally attacked, and I have moments where I feel really old because I had a young person a couple of years say to me in response to something I'd posted that they felt personally attacked, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they laughed and said, no, that's how young people talk these days, meaning that they identify with what I'm saying or can relate to it heavily. So I'm going to be wrapping up in just a minute, but I want to share a couple of free resources with you. Head over to YouTube and check out Sober Now's channel. About 110, 115 videos there, completely free, all on topics relating directly to recovery from substance use disorder, but also from trauma and mental illness. Our live streams are archived there every week, and so there's just a continued growing body of resources there that if you subscribe, you'll get a notification on. Would love to have you get access to everything that we're doing, and would love to, like, if you're watching this video later on, just shoot me a quick message on the post and let me know if it spoke to you. Let me know what kind of topics you'd like to see covered in the future. Always value your recommendations. And by all means, connect with me, jim@sobernow.com. If you have questions, if you're searching for resources, if you need a starting point based on where you are in recovery, very happy to provide that free of charge. And lastly, please, by all means, check out sobernow.com. We recently moved to a monthly subscription of under $15, and so we're more affordable than we've ever been. There's two programs there. Both of them are 28 days. One for affected others, those of us who have a loved one in active substance use disorder, and a second program for those of us who are seeking greater freedom from substance use disorder. Those are home study programs with video. They're completely confidential. Anonymity is guaranteed. I literally don't even need to know your name to have you derive some benefit from those. And for $15, it's the most inexpensive program I know that's professionally run. So check it out. Get familiar with the resources. Please take excellent care of yourself and each other as we continue to go through the pandemic. Sadly, every social problem, every disease, everything that we struggle with has been made worse by COVID. I'm disheartened to see overdose rates continuing to climb, relapse rates. Everything is rough right now. So to my estimation, we need each other more than we ever have, and my hope is that we can connect. So please take excellent care of you. Please connect with me, let me know how you're doing, and I will look forward to talking to you next Thursday at noon.